Welcome to Capital Outsider, a show about people and ideas outside the halls of power, exploring alternatives to conventional political wisdom.
This is Bill McMillan, the host today, and my guest here is former Senator Mike Gravel from the state of Alaska, and he is a candidate for president and a recent convert to the Libertarian Party from the Democratic Party. Senator
You
Gravel,
almost had a slip of the
Yes.
tongue of Republican.
Yep.
No, I'm happy to be a libertarian, and I feel very free as a result of this.
Last week you made the announcement to switch to the Libertarian Party, indicating that you'd become disillusioned with the Democrats. And I'm wondering, just a short while ago, you were a candidate for president as a Democrat, and just suddenly there's a transformation. Why is that?
No, there wasn't a transformation. My values haven't changed. They're the same as they've always been. I was somewhat of a misfit back when I was in the Senate as a Democrat, and my values haven't changed. The values, when I decided to run for president, I wanted to get into the debates. I did consider possibility of running as a libertarian back then or as a green, but I would not have got into the debates. And so my strategy was to get some visibility on the issue that I care about, which is empowering the American people, and I succeeded. It was tough. They didn't like my message. They tried to stifle me at every step, and they succeeded as a result of would you believe, with General Electric, as I drove by the plant here coming to this town, it was General Electric in cahoots with the Democratic leadership that shut me out last September and October in the last debate over obviously the possibility of going to war with Iran. And so it didn't make any sense for me to stay there. Might as well come out and really prove what I am, and I'm a libertarian, and I'm very proud of that. And I have really green tendencies, very strong green tendencies. So there's not a problem in that regard.
Let's talk about a couple of positions, and one of which is basically our foreign policy. And I think maybe we might want to refer back to your first years in the U.S. Senate, which was what year was that?
1969 to 81.
Okay, so 2 terms that you were. And there was a major foreign policy issue going on during that period of time. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, that was the Vietnam War, I presume you're talking about.
Yes, that's right.
And I opposed it. I thought it was terrible. And here too, that was a war that was initiated by the Democrats, was sustained by the Republicans. In fact, when Nixon took power, and he took power on the basis he's going to end the war, more Americans were killed under Richard Nixon than had been
Correct.
under Lyndon Johnson, and more Southeast Asians were killed. All told, we killed 3 million Southeast Asians and 58,000 Americans. And when we look back, it's still a communist country. We have most favored trade relationship with Vietnam. You can buy Baskin-Robbins ice cream cone in Hanoi. You can buy Kentucky Fried Chicken. And when you look back, why did we kill all these people? They died in vain. And this is exactly what's going on.
Isn't that a
in
very
Iraq.
difficult thing to say, that they died in vain?
No, it's not. In fact, it's very important to say it, because you see, wars beget more wars, and the sooner we realize that wars are a futile device of arbitrating human conflict, the sooner we'll do away with that device. And so if we don't have the courage to admit that you make these terrible mistakes, we'll continue to use that device, Bill. So it's sure, if you buy into, you got to be patriotic, support the boys. Well, I'll tell you what, you want to support the troops, get them the hell out of harm's way. That's the way you support. You don't put them in harm's way if you don't need to. Now, I have no problem going to war if you have a valid reason. But George Bush, with his preemptive war based upon fraudulent evidence, did not have a reason to put our American troops in harm's way, and he should probably go to a criminal court a global criminal court for what he did and the number. He killed, what, 4,000 Americans?
There's been precedent for that internationally, hasn't there?
Darn right. And I got to tell you, I become president. When Bill Clinton left office, he signed the treaty and threw it under the rug, and it didn't even go to the Senate. I will revive that signature of the World Criminal Court, send it to the Senate for ratification, and we Americans will no longer stand above the law, above world law, and we will see if George Bush measures up to that, and Bill Cheney and Henry Kissinger's and the others. Henry Kissinger can't travel to some of the countries because he would be under subpoena for the crimes that he committed in Chile with Pinochet and overthrowing that government.
I think we know where you stand on,
That's right.
on foreign policy, especially where it comes to warfare.
Well, but it's more than warfare. It's this whole attitude that we have of the military-industrial complex, because we go to war to sustain our American imperialism. Here, the simple question I would ask in this presidential election, it's got nothing to do with the personalities of Obama or Hillary or McCain. I'd ask the American people to ask these questions, and that is, why do we have to spend more than all the rest of the world put together on defense when there's not a country in the world that dare threaten us? Why do we have to spend all this treasure when our healthcare industry is in shambles, when our roads are clogged, when our bridges are falling down, when our educational system is non-existent essentially? Why do we have to squander our treasure in that regard? And if they can't give you a good reason why we have to squander that much money on a defense that's not needed, then don't vote for them. And if you do vote for them, then you deserve the idiocy that you get.
Let's go to another issue that sort of is tied into the war, and not just the current war, but also the Vietnam War, and I think perhaps probably before our lifetimes, many other wars as well. And that's the issue of civil liberties that seem to be suspended during periods of conflict, whether by necessity or perhaps by plan. Can you speak to that issue?
Oh, God, I'd love to if I could just get my hands on. Madison has a great quote about, once you go to war, all of these civil liberties just fall off. It's the price you pay for war. First off, you got to have secrecy. Secondly, you got to begin to erode all of the rights that people have because they begin to challenge your reasons to go to war. There is nothing that damages civil liberties more than the act of going to war and prosecuting war. That is the most debilitating part of our society. And so when you go to war repeatedly, one after the other, like going to war in Vietnam, and then Grenada, and then Kosovo, and then these are our wars in Guatemala, our wars in Nicaragua, and then our wars in Iraq, one after the other, you just damage our civil liberties over and over and over again, to the point where you get an act like the Patriot Act, 300+ pages, and you get the Congress acting like a mob, and they just vote for it without even knowing what's in this act. And then they vote repeatedly for torture. They vote for the spying on our citizens. I mean, we have lost more freedom than we realize. I'll give you a shocking...
Well, is this a plan? Not to get into conspiracy concept of this, but was there a plan that really was more important than the war, and that was to suspend civil liberties?
Of course it's a plan. It's a plan by the elites to continue to lock down their control over the majority of the people. Of course there's a plan. It's a natural plan. It may not be a conspiratorial plan, but it's a natural plan. That is the way you continue to grow your power. People,
so it springs from power and the desire for power.
It's like wealth. People say, well, why, this guy's wealthy. Why does he want more money? He's wealthy. He's wealthier than sin. He just wants more money.
Nothing else he can do.
There's no end to greed. There's no end to the greed for power. And so you go on. And that's the sadness of it. Because you need, here, when is enough enough?
Are these good people?
Not really.
Not really?
Not
Okay.
really, no. George, you say, is George Bush a good person? No, not really.
Okay.
He doesn't understand. Here, he'll tell you that God told him to invade Iraq.
Well,
I don't know what kind of God he prays to, but it sure ain't the God that I have cotton to.
you mentioned a key word to libertarians, and that's rights. How do you define rights? At what level do you think rights are most important?
The individual is sovereign, and I take that very deeply. And when I talk about rights, nobody has the right to invade upon my sovereignty. Now, as I walk into a society of other people, you have no right to invade upon my sovereignty. I have no right to invade upon your sovereignty. But we have to recognize that, and this is theory now, that you have to live, and so we have to occupy the same space. So we must accommodate that we occupy the same space. So now we recognize that I must respect your sovereignty, you must respect my sovereignty. What we've done...
So we're still retaining certain basic rights.
Of course. And so what we've recognized over time as more and more people come in is we've learned that to adjudicate or to arbitrate as our sovereignties come into rubbing up against each other, we've developed law. And it's law that helps us handle the frictions of our sovereignties rubbing up against each other.
Should there be some limitations on what can be
of
covered by law?
Of course there should. And that's where judgment comes in. And that's where here, Thomas Jefferson, who was a great articulator, he had other foibles that I have problems with, but in the first page of the Senate manual, he said, the majority protects itself by its very numbers, and that's very important. The minority is protected by law. And so as we mature as a society with greater and greater respect for law, and that's very important. Now, when we pass laws, like I'll tell you, the laws we have with respect to the war on drugs, that's bad law. And when you have bad law, people do not respect it, they do not obey it. And so we erode the importance of law in our society.
And the respect for law officers as well.
That's right. And so that is a diminution of that. So we're damaging an important tool in handling the frictions of our conflicting sovereignties. And that's literally suicidal to the survival of our success in society.
It sounds so self-evident, and it's before our very eyes.
Is.
How come people don't recognize it?
Because
or
we
are
have
they just
stupid
accept
leaders.
it?
No, they recognize it, but under our system, the people do not have the power. Listen to the rhetoric of politicians. They define the problem dramatically. That's what we do. And then people assume because I define the problem dramatically that I know the solution. That's not so. Listen to the words of Obama. Listen to the words of Hillary or McMillan. You know, they generally end, we the people can solve this problem. What's this? We kimosabe. You have the power. I don't have the power, except I can't get at you till 4 years later for a few seconds in a polling booth. And it's been filtered down that I don't have any alternatives. No, the answer is you don't have the power to exercise a solution. Now, that's what I'm talking about when I talk about...
I knew you wanted to get into that
That's
again.
right. If I can empower the American people to repeal laws, to make laws, that is the power. So when I say, I want to be your leader, but I want you to be able to make laws with me. I want to be your legislative leader. You make the laws as a citizen. You repeal the laws as a citizen. Boy, you watch the changes I'll be able to bring about by you, by putting forth. You make the changes for health care. You make the changes for taxation. You make the changes to end the war. Here, if you had the power to make laws...
You're not just talking about me, though.
I'm talking about you, the American people. That's who I'm talking about. So when you hear a person like Obama say, I'm going to bring about change, what change is he going to bring about? I don't see a change in the carload that he's talking about. No change. Here, I bring about, let's end the war on drugs. He's a person who says he's worked in the inner city. Is he not observed about all the drug problems in the inner city? Has he ever said anything about stopping the war on drugs? Of course not. He doesn't want to be controversial. He wants to play it safe. Well, when a person runs for office and all he's concerned about is playing it safe to get your votes, I got to tell you, he's a coward. And he'll be a coward when he's president of the United States. We saw that with Bill Clinton, and you'll see it with Obama, and you'll see it with Hillary, and you will see it with McCain.
And we didn't see that with you in the Senate in 1972, right?
You saw some changes. And when people say,
Because
I'm going to bring everybody together. How are you going to bring people together? You're going to turn around, you're going to raise money for Democrats, you're going to run against Republicans, and you think you're going to get harmony into Congress? It's a joke. It's a joke.
Now, in speaking to my colleague Eric earlier, in talking about party labels, you said something that I scribbled down quickly, talking about how American people sort of, and people in general, I guess, sort of choose their candidates or choose who they're going to be associated from and with because of party labels. But one of the things you said during that was that people use this party labels as a shortcut and that they don't have time to investigate what the issue is about. How is that going to change, really, with your initiative?
It doesn't change. It doesn't change.
So we might have a vote where a whole bunch of people are signing on when they haven't really taken the time to analyze the...
No. I have defined a method of communication which is altogether different. In the Congress and in our lives, we vote on cues. I'm drinking this water. I presume it's safe, that somebody has made sure it's safe. So we vote on cues. And so what will happen is in the procedures of communication, I outlined it a little bit earlier, and I don't want to go at it again because it's a complicated process of legislating.
Okay.
But you have a cue, and you have hearings, you have deliberations, you have advisory votes, and so you'll decide that, hey, I don't have the time to become informed about that, but I trust this guy's vote, or if this guy I met, he knows something about this, and he's going to vote that way, and I'll vote that way. That's the way we live our lives, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what will happen is the more we get involved in the process of legislating, the more we're going to do a better job. We right now are stuck in civic adolescence. That's the way representative government holds us. They keep us in adolescence. We want this, but we don't want to pay for it. That's an adolescent attitude.
That's a prevalent attitude
of course it
with
is.
Adults.
But that's what representative government does to you. Now, when you have to take responsibility, you're going to grow up. You're going to grow up. You're going to make a mistake. I don't change human nature with this law of empowering people. Human nature is what it is. But now when you make a mistake, you feel the pain, you'll make the change. Under representative government, when they make a mistake, you feel the pain, they don't feel the pain, they don't make the change. With the Vietnam War, the people knew they made a mistake, or they knew their leaders made a mistake 2 years into it. It took 10 years to make the change. Now, if the people had the power, here you got right now, if the people had the power to be able to vote an end to the Iraq War, we'd have done it a year ago, 2 years ago. But we can't do it. We can't even do it now, even when the Democrats said they were going to do it and they're now in power.
The lifeblood of politics is money.
That's right. That will change.
Well, we'd have to change the tax structure and the compulsory feature of taxes in order for that to change, wouldn't it? That's where the real power lies.
And that's really what I want to change, because I am for the fair tax. I want to do away with the income tax, which is corrupt. I want to do away with right now, we tax.
One other thing about the income tax that I know you want to say, it's intrusive.
It robs us. It robs us. Here, what I want to do is we tax your wages at anywhere from 35 to 47%. We
like people to work, don't we?
But we disincentivize
yes.
you. And then we turn around and we tax corporations at 35 or more %. And then we turn around and we tax your investment income at 15%. But we don't tax wealth. We don't tax wealth in this society of ours. I want to tax wealth. And so people say, well, Rafael, you want to do away with taxes on corporations? Of course I want to do away with taxes on corporations. I want to tax wealth. And so, but it's progressive. With the income tax, the more you earn, the more you pay. But now they've gamed the system. So the more you spend, the more you pay. I want to change this country from a spending country to a savings country. And the economists tell us that we will bring about 10% growth. We will then have jobs. We will then be able to refurbish our entire infrastructure, make education the #1 priority of the nation, have health care for everybody, and have more freedom. And what it costs the private sector of our society to comply with the tax code is $270 billion a year.
The hidden cost.
That's what it costs. That's half of what we spent in Iraq for the war, and that's every year. Think of how creative, by freeing up the diminution of government invasion in your society, the IRS peering into everything that you do. That's just the beginning.
Let's talk about government programs of various kinds. You've proposed a universal nonprofit health program, single payer nonprofit.
That was 30 years ago.
Okay, what do you propose right now?
Right now is a competitive system of competition just on the administrative cost of healthcare. What I'm proposing is that the people would define the services in regional organizations. Big difference, big difference.
Funding for it would be?
Would be through a retail sales tax.
Okay, so you're going to tax people and how are you going to control cost?
By a cap based upon what a percentage of GDP.
Would that work?
What do you mean it'll work? You're going to have a cap on GDP?
Are you going to have some people asking for more services than that cap
provides? If they want to get more services, they'll have to pay for more services. Mm-hmm. If you're 90 years old and you want a heart transplant, you're going to have to pay for it because we can't afford that.
What if you're 40 years old and you need a heart transplant?
Then you can get a heart transplant.
But if you pay for it?
No.
Oh, okay. You're going to have an age factor built into some of the services that are provided?
Here, the word is triage. When you're on a battlefield and the doctor's coming through and he looks at one person, he knows this person isn't going to make it. He knows this person has a chance of making it. Who's he going to operate on?
Well, he's going to exercise some judgment.
Correct. And that's what we do. That is what we will do, is exercise judgment. Here, now, if you get a person who's smoking for 30 years and who's obese, and you're going to reward that person by pumping all this money onto that person as a person who lives a good, clean life and needs medical care.
But that smoker, obese smoker, who can pay for it, he'd still be able to get.
Let him go pay for it.
Okay, all right.
But you'll create a whole bunch of incentives to get people to live a better life. Incentives, voluntary incentives, not force, voluntary incentives. You can do that. So if in the competitive insurance for administrative costs, if they want to pay for you to give you an incentive to join Gold's Gym and exercise and get a healthier body, I got to tell you, American health system, we're not as healthy as nation as we think we are. I exercise. I try to eat healthily. And at my age, I feel I'm healthier than John McCain. And I'm older than John McCain.
Well, yes. By how many years?
Well, I don't want to tell you.
Okay.
And I've got 4 good years left. I'm only going to be president 4 years.
Is John McCain the same person here in 2008 as he was in 2000?
I don't think so. I think John McCain's got some problems. He's a warmonger.
Yeah.
And there's only 2 people running for office that have been in the military. He has, and his father was an admiral, his grandfather was an admiral. Well, my father was a carpenter and he's a house painter. Yeah. And I've got as much patriotism for this country as he has.
Oh yes, I'm sure.
That's right.
I'm sure.
And I didn't. Well, I won't go there. But I have no problem fighting a war if it's a meritorious war. He believes in preventive wars. I don't. I don't think we need to go around the world declaring war on people who are not a threat to us.
You can see enemies everywhere if you believe in that philosophy.
He sees them all over. He sees them all over.
Doesn't necessarily call them by the right name, but he sees them all over.
That's right. Well, but he'll always have Lieberman, who wrote the resolution to go into Iraq when there was. Isn't it interesting? We get Al-Qaeda, which is over there in Afghanistan. They turn around and damage us, and we're going to really punish somebody. So we go over to Iraq on the other side of the world and we kill them.
Let's talk about another key issue that comes up every once in a while, and then it sort of gets suppressed for a little while. But Immigration, borders, amnesty, deportation, those type of words certainly ring with a number of people in the electorate.
My parents were immigrants. They came here very poor, looking to make a living. Okay, I look upon immigrants as people who come over here and all they're guilty of is wanting to feed their families and work hard, and they make a contribution to our society. Borders, I'd like to see them all drop. When I was a senator, I once introduced legislation to do it with the Customs Service and immigration. Isn't it interesting? We're building a fence down there in Mexico to keep out what, the terrorists? I don't know of any Mexican terrorists.
Is this similar to the Berlin Wall?
That's right. And look at Europe. 6 countries have lowered all their barriers. You can go from Spain to the Baltic and never have to show your driver's license, and you can work anywhere. And now, if we do away with if you put in the tax system I want, the fair tax, we're going to need more people to come in. There's more jobs than we can provide for. We need immigrants to come in and rebuild our country. And so with these people, the nativists, you know what's behind this whole immigrant nativistism? It's a sense of failure. We're failing in education, we're failing in healthcare, we're failing in our foreign policy, we're failing in rebuilding this country. And what do you do when you fail? You blame somebody else. You blame those Mexican Latinos that are coming in. Failure, scapegoating, that's all we're doing. Shame on them for doing that. I don't buy into this for a half a second. I've seen, when I lived in California, I can't think of a group of people who are harder working than these Mexicans that come in. Whenever I see a person that has an accent, I ask them where they're from, and I look at them and I say, boy, happy to have you here. Work hard. Make this country better. That's the way I approach this problem.
I want to give you the same opportunity at the end of this show to speak to some particular issues that you might want to speak to. We have 2 minutes left. And
same thing. I want to ask people to buy my book. It's called Citizen Power, citizen-power.us. It will inform you on how you can be informed. Let me repeat the definition of Cicero over 2,000 years ago, the definition of freedom, and that is, freedom is the participation in power. The central power of government is to be able to make laws so that you can repeal laws, so that you can pass laws. And if you don't participate in the central power of government, which is lawmaking, then you're not free. And so if you want to be free, you have to become a lawmaker. And I've drafted the legislation that goes around the government that will empower you to be free and to have liberty. That's what my candidacy is all about, and that's the reason why I'm running to be the President of the United States, the first President of the United States as a libertarian.
Senator Gravel has also explained some of how this program would work on an earlier show in which he was interviewed by Eric Sunwall. This is Bill McMillan. Happy to have Mike Gravel as our guest here today. And thank you very much for watching.
Thank you.